I took the caretaker job at Ashfield Church because I thought small towns slept at night. The church sat on a hill above 2 streets and a feed store. Its white paint flaked in curls, and the bell tower leaned a little more after every storm. People said the bells rang on their own sometimes, but they also said the town parade still mattered. My first week, I learned which one they believed. The first night I swept the nave and heard a bell toll once, a clean note that did not match the hour. The clock in the sacristy read 11:47. The brass plaque under the bell rope said, "Pull only on Sundays." The rope moved anyway, a slow sway like breathing. I wrote it off to wind. The windows were shut. The air did not move. Ashfield Church had 4 rows of pews and a balcony that sagged. The choir loft smelled like dust and old paper. The organ worked if you pumped it by foot and leaned on the keys with your whole arm. The pastor had moved away 2 summers ago. A retired deacon unlocked the side door for me and said, "Watch the tower at night." He handed me a ring of keys and a ledger half full of names and donations. The last entry was 3 years old. The basement held an old classroom with tiny desks and hymnals with sticky covers. A chalkboard against the wall still had words from a lesson. Call and response. Someone had written the responses and erased the calls. I found the eraser in a drawer, worn to a nub. I wrote my name on the board without thinking, then wiped it out until the green looked scratched. Ashfield had a pattern. The diner closed at 9, the feed store closed at 6. The gas pumps clicked off when the owner felt like it. The church only filled on weddings and on the first Sunday in May for a flower show that no longer had flowers. Teenagers came up the hill to smoke and write initials under the pews with pen tips. They always left by 11. I liked the silence after. I thought silence meant finished. On my 3rd night, I heard a second toll at 12:03. One note again, then quiet. I climbed the stairs to the tower with a flashlight. The steps were steep and cramped. Dust lay in the corners like fur. The bell rope swung in a slow arc and stopped when I reached the landing. The clapper sat still. From up there, I could see Main Street. One car passed, a red pickup, moving slower than a car moves when someone is in a hurry. The driver never looked up. I started keeping a log. Time, temperature, any sound. At 1:10, the roof creaked like boards adjusting. At 2:05, a hymn hummed in the ductwork, a tune I did not know, 6 notes rising and falling as if someone practiced scales on a flute that had no breath. At 2:27, the chalk in the basement rolled off the ledge and broke in 2. I wrote it all down. The ledger pages curled when I turned them, stiff with old air. The deacon checked in every afternoon. He asked if the bells were quiet. I said yes because I did not want his look. He told me the bells were cast before the war and had names: Faith, Hope, Charity. He said Charity cracked the winter the pastor left and no one had fixed it. I asked which one rang at night. He shrugged and said the tower knows who shows up. The next night I found a folded paper on the front pew. A postcard from 1987 with the church printed in bright white. On the back, someone had written in careful blue ink, "Ring for those who forgot to answer." Below it, a list of first names, each with a date. The last line was blank, but had an underline as if a name belonged there. The paper smelled faintly like a book left in sunlight. I put it in the ledger and closed the cover. At 3:13, the bells rang together, once. The sound hit like cold water on the crown of my head. The rope lifted, moved left, then right, then fell still. The air around the nave dropped a degree. Breath clouded near the center aisle as if the church had a mouth. I walked to the rope and put one hand on it without pulling. It felt warm. My fingers left sweat on the fibers. The balcony creaked. I pointed my light and caught a shape in the loft, a figure sitting on the choir bench. It looked like someone in a choir robe, head low, hands folded, but the folds of the robe did not bend right. The shadows underneath made straight lines where knees should be round. I said my call sign the way I used to speak on a night shift in a different job. The figure did not move. A soft second note rang from the tower. Not a full toll, more like a breath through brass. Back in the basement, the chalkboard had writing again. Responses lined up on the right, neat and even. On the left, the erased calls had returned faint, barely there until you looked sideways. Who answers the bell? Who keeps the names? Who holds the rope when no one is left? My name had appeared in the corner where I had wiped it, letters thin and stubborn like they wanted to stay through rain. I went back upstairs and stood under the tower. The ledger on the front pew lay open to the last page. The list of names from the postcard sat there now in pencil, the dates shifted one day forward. The blank line pulsed with a damp spot like a thumb pressed there. I closed the book. I told myself to lock the door and leave. I stood instead and listened for another note. The bells rang a third time, not loud, a whisper of metal. The rope lifted an inch. I said out loud, "No." The sound in the ductwork changed, losing the 6 notes and holding one pitch, a thin line that made my teeth ache. The figure in the loft stood without standing, rising like the robe filled with air. It turned enough to show a face made of shadow. No features, only a smooth place that reflected back the beam of my light in a way that did not belong to skin. I put both hands on the rope and pushed it back toward the tower body. It did not resist. It leaned with me like a partner who had decided the dance was over. The pitch in the ducts fell away. The figure in the loft sat again without bending. From outside, tires hissed on wet pavement, though it had not rained. The clock in the sacristy clicked from 3:12 to 3:13 and then to 3:14 in one jump, as if the tower paid its bill. In the morning, I asked the deacon about the names on the postcard. He recognized most of them. People who had moved away, people who stopped coming to town after their last service. He did not ask why the dates were one day off. I did not tell him the list had a blank underline that had felt wet. He gave me a stepladder and said I should dust the loft. He said not to mind the robe. He said the choir left old things everywhere. If you ever keep a church at night, lock the rope and ignore the calendar. Do not read blank lines out loud. Do not write your name on boards where the call's no chalk. When bells ring once at the wrong hour, listen from the doorway, not from under the tower. Some buildings ring for answers they are owed. Do not be the first voice they hear. I kept the job through winter. The tower leaned a little more, but the bells stayed quiet most nights. When they did speak, I counted once and wrote nothing. In the ledger, I taped the postcard to the inside cover and drew a thin line through the blank entry. If someone needs to ring for the ones who forgot, they can pull on Sundays. I keep weekdays to breathing. Subscribe for more original horror stories.